Right? Medgar Evers was a World War II veteran who was assassinated by a white World War II veteran. You have to tell that whole story. And once you start to tell that story, then your self-concept changes.
That's right. That's right.
And you see this, we know this. I mean, this is why they ban our history. They ban our history because black history, by definition, is political.
That's right.
Because black people, by definition, are political, right? Our history is political because every story of American greatness, every story of American exceptionalism you want to tell, here we are off to the corner. Say, how do you explain us?
That's right.
If all this is true, why are we here? How you bought and sold our ancestors, how you claim to be democratizing Europe, but denying violently democracy for black people here. So we're the most inconvenient people to the story of American exceptionalism.
Right.
So they want to ban our history because we give lie, right? We reveal the lie.
Hey, what's up, fam? How you doing? How are we doing? Super great from wherever you're watching us from. As you know, these represent Agentic Stories, and I'm hoping that you are super fine. Now, when you talk about the black history, this is not just chronological past events, but I'm talking about things tied to black history. It is not just talking about things that happened in the past, but the account of events and how they happened and why history is important. Now, in today's video, we're going to be watching this black lady. Probably she's a scholar. I don't know her name. So if you know her name, help me note down his name in the comment section so that we can help those who want to know her and more of his scholarly videos that she talks about. This is an interview that was done trying to understand why do white folks fear black history. And that starts with the black history contains the truth that these are things that they don't want you to know. And now just present, you heard Mr. Donald Trump trying to close down and shut down archives, shut down libraries that teaches or that talks about black history. Sometimes talking about black history is like people are weaponizing black history and politicizing also black history, such that if a black person gets out and starts talking about this, it seems like they're doing something illegal, right? So when we talk about black history, there are so many things that are tied to this that makes white folks really fear and really talk about all this. But I believe that this is important part of history that we need to teach the coming generation, that we need to teach kids in schools, that we need to teach everyone. We need to do sensitization of the importance of black history, because this was the missing piece. A lot of schools during back in the days, they were taught the European syllabus. And remember, the European syllabus won't allow you to teach school-going kids about their true history. And it begins, for you to know yourself, you need to know and look back in history. Because for you to know where you're going, you need to look where you came from to gauge how you're going to be adapting and change, right? Because every person is subject to change. And so as time goes, black people need tactics in how to deal with a couple of challenges and problems that they face. But the biggest question in the room today, why do white folks fear black history? Let me know in the comment section what you think. And just before letting the video roll, I just want to remind you, for those who are watching us for the first time, I'm highly grateful and I ask you to subscribe to the channel, join our membership, and really get to see what we can offer you. For those who are always coming back watching my videos, I'm really grateful. For those sending me super thanks, for those donating through my Cash App, I'm really appreciate. If you could check my Cash App, if you want to donate on my account, you could check my my Cash App in my bio. So let's watch the video and learn together as we educate each other. Let's watch the video.
Of this country,
Right.
And we are heroes of that story. So what the research shows is that when you teach black children black history, they do better academically.
Absolutely.
This is not shocking.
That's right. It's right.
Right? If you see yourself in the story, then you have a powerful sense of who you are. Sure. And I know, I mean, this is why they ban our history, because once I got a little taste of black history, I became incorrigible as a student. I was challenging everything, right? I would go up in social studies like, where are we? Why aren't you talking about this? What about this, right? And so all of a sudden, you don't just accept the narrative that they give you, and you start to challenge it. And you start to have an understanding. So I, because of this class I took at 15 years old with a black educator named Mr. Ray Dow, where he introduced me to Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett, and the year 1619, I became the child who would go on to create 1619 Project.
Wow.
If I don't get that class, I don't create this project.
That's right.
And so they want to ban the class because they don't want more of us.
That's right.
They don't want more Dr. Blacks. They don't want more Nicole Hannah Jones. They don't want people who can help our children know that there is nothing wrong with black folks. There's something wrong with our country.
That's right. That's right. That's right. 1954, right? Brown versus Board, right? And most of us in this room are, of course, are aware that thousands and thousands of black children were shipped to white schools, right? 1619 Project, of course, covers that. The question I would like to ask you is, what did white children miss by never being under the tutelage of black instruction?
That's such a, that's a powerful and an important question. And I think, you know, we're taught to think about Brown v. Board, of course, as being about the deficiencies in the education of black children.
Right.
But if you actually read Brown v. Board, if you read the arguments that the NAACP was making, if you look at the oral arguments, which I'm nerdy as hell, so I've read all of it. Are y'all okay? Yeah. Okay. It's okay. We can enjoy ourselves too. I tell a lot of jokes because this is hard, and if I didn't tell a lot of jokes, I'd be up here crying.
Right.
So I read all the oral arguments, and the NAACP was actually making two arguments. They were making the argument that the segregation was degrading to black Americans in a society built on racial caste, because the segregation wasn't just arguing we should have our own things. It was meant to treat us as inferior, right? It was meant to show that we were less than, and that oftentimes we were getting deprived of the equal amount of resources. For instance, in Georgia, there was a span of about 40 years where there wasn't a single high school in the state. They were funding high schools for white kids, but their own children didn't have a high school, right? Or they weren't getting, you know, school buses, or they weren't getting textbooks. So we know that the resources weren't the same. So they were making that argument. But the parallel argument that they were making was that segregation was giving black children a false sense of their own inferiority, but it was also giving white children a false sense of their superiority.
Right.
Now, the court didn't rule on that.
Right.
But what they were saying is that we are in a multiracial world. We are going out into the world, so you have to think 1954, what's happening. This is just at the beginning of the Cold War. We're starting to see, you know, communism rising in America, and communists are engaging in this propaganda campaign. And so what they're really trying to say is that you are teaching white children that they're superior, and you're also not giving them an education to go out into a world that doesn't look like their classrooms. It doesn't look like their communities. So what white children were deprived of is, one, you know, just the ability to be around black people, and we're amazing. But they were also being deprived of the ability, and still are, because white children and black children remain segregated today, of an ability to get an education that prepares them for the world.
Yes.
An education that gives them empathy. I mean, this is why we have so much polarization, is white children can go most of their lives without ever having to have intimate relationships with anyone who's black, and certainly not someone who can be in a position of authority.
Right.
Because the funny thing about segregation is, because it so limited the opportunities for black Americans, black educators were actually far more educated than white educators.
That's right.
They had much higher degrees.
That's right.
They tended to, you know, they would go and get their PhD or their master's degree, but could not work as a doctorate at a university or a scientist. So they would get these degrees, and then they would come back into the K-12 classroom.
That's right.
And so there's research that actually shows that they, on average, were far more educated
That's right.
and had far more advanced degrees than white teachers.
That's right.
Now,
Yes, ma'am.
again, think about narrative. How many of y'all have ever heard that?
Yeah.
Right? It's true.
It is true.
But that's not the narrative. So the narrative was that our children were getting an inferior education. They were getting inferior resources.
Right.
But they did not have inferior educators.
Right. It makes me
That
think.
was a difference.
Absolutely. It makes me think of us at these HBCUs, right? Because of course I'm at an HBCU and so are you. And the beauty and the power of HBCUs, I think that most people don't know, is that we were really making bricks without straw.
Yes.
Right? And we have been teaching
Still
black
are
children. That's right.
sometimes,
Did
yeah.
you hear me? We have been teaching black children not just textbook knowledge, but also knowledge of self, spiritual knowledge, right? Spiritual nurturing, right? The whole self, right?
Yes.
And I think this is critical because in some ways we have not really, as black people, we've not really supported these institutions as fully as we need to. But these institutions have been the lifeblood of black people,
Yes.
right? And I'm saying that also because I'm segueing to an institution. I'm probably gonna get like 2 more questions. Good Lord help me. One of those is the black church. And you know, I was telling you, I'm the church musician. I believe in the black church institutionally. I don't know that I believe in the black church theologically, right? That's another thing, right? But the question I want to ask you is, if you had your way, as the brilliant author of this text, if you had your way, what would you do with the black church?
Lord. Now you're trying to get me canceled. I'm gonna get fired.
You're fired, right?
And I'm gonna get canceled on the same day. On my day off, Saturday. Come on, man. You know, so one, I would really suggest that folks read the essay in the book called Church by
Absolutely.
Anthea Butler. I
Loved it.
I am not a theologian. In fact, when I occasionally get invited to give a talk at a church, I get worried that I'm gonna burst into flames when I'm in there. I'm not a religious person myself. I think that if we look historically at the role of the black church,
Yes.
the black church was always, even from the time of slavery, a place of political organizing,
Absolutely.
of liberation organizing.
Absolutely.
Because the black church was really the only place that black people could gather.
That's right.
And not be under white supervision.
Right.
And so they really were founded as these radical places that were not just about telling black folks to get their reward when they die.
Right.
Right, but believing that the God of, that led the Israelites out of slavery also believed that they should not be enslaved.
That's right.
And that they had a right.
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Honestly, while I watched the video, I had a lot to learn. And really, it was interesting seeing how the black lady broke down all these perfectly and made me understand really why they fear black history. Somehow, a lot of things that were done, they were done deliberately to hide the truth from black folks. And you might ask yourself, why are they trying to hide the truth from black people? And share with me, I prepared a presentation that I want to share with you, breaking down why they don't want you to learn your black history and why they fear you getting to understand and knowing who you really are. Now, first reason is the weight of memory and trauma. Black history is not merely a chronicle of past events. It is a deep well of generational trauma, oppression, and resilience. For many black people, engaging with this history means confronting centuries of enslavement, colonialism, segregation, violence, and systemic dehumanization. This is not just an academic knowledge. It is lived memory encoded in family stories, inherited pain, and psychological burdens. To get into black history is to face the legacy of horror that continues to affect black lives. today in form of racial profiling, economic exclusion, and educational disparities, right? Um, the emotional weight of this history can be overwhelming, leading to some to avoid it altogether out of self preservation or fear of mental toll it may exact. It is true. The having the weight of trauma makes it so hard for um, many black people or many white people who don't want to uh, get to talk about this, right? And so it is really, really important um, to learn and understand how this really happened. So I understand the toll that these might be towards black people, and how white people don't want to be confronted about these truths, right? And so it is really important for us to learn and see and understand all these perspectives and how it is important, you know. Secondly, is fear of historical accountability. One of the core reasons why white people may fear black history is the fear of being held accountable, morally, socially, or politically, for the atrocities committed by white individuals, systems, and nations throughout the history. Black history, when truthfully told, exposed the role of whiteness in global colonization, transatlantic slave trade, apartheid segregation, and racial capitalism. These truths challenge the sanitized narratives many white people have grown up with. The acknowledgement of these brutal realities require a reckoning with personal and collective complicity. And this can be deeply unsettling for those invested in a narrative of innocence and benevolence. Thus, avoidance becomes a coping mechanism, a way to escape discomfort of historical truth. I was talking about being confronted, about talking, about discussing all these problems. Um, Another thing that I would like to address is disruption of national myths. Black history often dismantles cherished national myths such as freedom, democracy, and equality that white dominated societies build their identity upon. In the US, for example, the celebration of founding fathers and the Constitution is complicated by their involvement in slavery and, native genocide. In Britain, glorification of empires obscures the violence, exploitation, and racial hierarchy it imposes on Africa, the Caribbean, and Asia. For white individuals whose sense of pride and belonging is rooted in these narratives, Black history can feel like a betrayal. It doesn't merely add a new chapter to the story, it forces a complete re-evaluation of what they were taught to believe. Also, you get to understand that the fear of losing moral superiority is another factor that makes white folks fear black history. Now, when you talk about fear of losing moral superiority, this is what I mean. White supremacy, you know very well, that relied, has long relied on the myth of white moral and civilizational superiority. And you know damn well that black history contradicts this by highlighting African contributions to science, art, governance, and spirituality long before European contact. It also showcases white barbarity, from lynchings and medical experiments to colonial massacres. This reversal, where white history is exposed as violent and exploitative, and black history as rich and resilient, can threaten the psychological foundation upon which white identity was constructed. Some fear that engaging with black history may require surrendering the belief in inherited white virtue, which for many is deeply ingrained from childhood. That's a couple of things that really happen that I feel like we need to address. Also, let's talk about guilt and emotional discomfort. Black history, especially when focused on slavery, colonialism, and systemic racism, evokes powerful emotion. Guilt, shame, sadness, and anger. Many white people are not equipped to deal with these emotions because their socialization, because The socialization has avoided serious conversation about race and injustices. Instead of processing these feelings constructively, some shut down, deflect, or even become defensive. Guilt becomes a block, not a bridge. The emotional labor required to comfort pain truths about the past and how those truths live on present day privilege. This is something many white people fear or reject altogether. Um, Also, you need to understand that another reason why they fear is loss of cultural dominance. The widespread teaching of celebration of Black history would mean a rebalancing of cultural narratives. This challenges the dominance of white figures, white values, white experiences as the center of historical knowledge. For some white people, this feels like a threat, a zero sum game in which any attention given to Black excellence or Black suffering somehow diminishes white importance. In reality, the expansion of historical understanding benefits everyone, but the fear of losing cultural centrality leads to many resist to Black history out of a desire to maintain the status quo, even unconsciously. I'm also going to be talking about political anxiety and fear of change. Some people meet change positively, while some people meet change negatively. Now, and then of it all, we have a group of folks that fear change, right? Black history is inherently political because it exposes systems of power and inequality. Learning about the long arc of Black resistance from slave revolts to rights to Pan Africanism often leads to demands for justice, reparations, policy change, and systemic reform. Many white people fear that recognizing these demands could shift power away from them. They worry that the historical redress of past wrongs might come as a personal or political cost. This fear of redistribution, whether of wealth, privilege, or influence, makes Black history feels dangerous, not just informative. Um, Also going to be addressing something to do with inherited denial and family legacy. Many white families avoid discussing their ancestors' involvement in slavery, colonization, or racial violence. Black history, when explored seriously, usually it reveals that ordinary white people, um, not just elites, benefited from the participated in racial injustice. Discovering that one of the greatest grandparents owned slaves, enforcing Jim Crow laws, or profited from segregation can be deeply unsettling. It complicates the narrative of being from good people. Rather than comfort these difficult truths, some choose to avoid Black history entirely, fearing that it will may uncover both their lineage and identity. Let's talk about fragility and fear of being judged. D'Angelo talked about white fragility. And so Black history really triggers uh, white fragility. White fragility, a term popularized by a scholar called Robin DiAngelo, describes the defensive reactions many white people have when their racial worldview is challenged. Black history threatens the illusion of colorblind or post-racial society by showing how racism has always been and remains a foundational part of modern life. Some white people fear being labeled racist or oppressive simply for being white, and they conflate the study of Black history with personal attacks. This fear, while often misplaced, causes many to shut down or avoid learning altogether, protecting themselves from perceived moral condemnation. Um, Also, when we talk about fear of being judged, we also talk about fear of being asked to act. To study Black history is to recognize that injustice was not only historical, but continues in mass today in mass incarceration, education gaps, housing discrimination, and police violence. This recognition brings with it moral imperative to act, whether through allyship, protest, education, or political advocacy. But many white people fear this responsibility. It may demand that they speak out against family members, disrupt social norms, or give up certain privileges. Um, Fear of being forced out of passive complicity into active solidarity is another reason Black history is being resisted. Also, insecurity about identity. As the foundation of whiteness is disconstructed through the lens of Black history, some white people experience identity crisis. If whiteness is not cultural identity but a political construct rooted in domination, then who really are they? Really, unlike many communities of color, white people often lack deep ethnic or cultural identity, especially in settlers nations like the US or Australia. When Black history challenges the legitimacy of whiteness, it destabilizes a very self-concept that many have never questioned. The existential insecurity can produce fear, confusion, or backlash. Really, tell me what you know about all this lecture. I hope it was helpful. I hope it was educative. These are presented Generic Stories, and I'm hoping to see you in my next video. But until then, peace, love, and harmony. Salute.